This is, the first 113, 12 pages of the novel I'm working on. Started it back in early April, I believe. It's called From Spokane to Granite Falls. 6 houses further along Taylor Street from the Caldwell family stood an older home in need of numerous repairs, which also lay claim to a sordid history of occupants. Caldwell kids, along with all the other children in the neighborhood, called it either the Knot House or the Slaughterhouse. John and Robbie Caldwell had even one recent day heard a series of bitter, sobbing screams issue forth through an upstairs third-floor window, which they'd never seen closed even during the coldest days of winter. The two boys passed this house each day during their 10-minute walk to and from Granite Falls High School, from which John would graduate with honors in June and into which Robbie had just entered as a sophomore. As brothers, they were much different from one another, as brothers tend to be, although they were equally loved and equally well brought up by their parents, Hugh and Patricia Caldwell. The boys had a few stark differences between their individual personalities. A few months ago, shortly before Christmas, Patricia one night had said to her husband, "I'm so glad that Robbie turned out differently than John. He's light-hearted, whereas John is so serious at times, I worry about him." "He's an excellent student, Patty. Of course he's serious," Hugh said. "Robbie's like a fuck-off in comparison." "Hugh, the boy's only 15. Give him a break, for God's sake. At least he has a sense of humor. It takes a lot more to get by in this world than laughs, Patty." Hugh and Patty had met each other while they were both attending Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. Having gone out on a few dates during which they had both remained chaste and mutually tantalizing while getting to know each other. One night Hugh called her and after a cheerful greeting got to the point. "I went to the jewelry store today," he said. A slight tremor of anticipation passed through her, and she said, "Hugh, last week you said you barely had over $100 in your checking account. Why on earth would you go to a jewelry store?" And later that evening he walked over to her apartment, which she shared with 3 other girls. They walked to a nearby park, deserted that evening in late April, and he said after a long pause that he wanted the 2 of them to get married, and after letting out a brief shriek of delight, she said yes, oh yes, she would marry him. In June, at the graduation ceremony where Hugh had been presented with a degree in electrical engineering and Patty in political science, their parents met one another for the first time, and Hugh saw where Patty had obtained her good looks. His future mother-in-law was drop-dead gorgeous, spelled like her daughter, although with a casual yet sophisticated air about her. Mrs. McLaren took an instant liking to him, as well as her taciturn father, who said hardly a word during dinner at a restaurant where the servers all wore black trousers and a bow tie around the neck of their white shirts. One night at the Caldwell dinner table, Robbie asked his mother, "Did Grandmama come from Russia?" "No, dear," Patty said in return. "She was 11 years old when her parents came to the United States from Ukraine, which is next door to Russia." Robbie adored his grandmother with her Ukrainian accent, which of course sounded Russian to him. She'd been born Svetlana Trovsky, but took the name Sylvia after a few months in Spokane, Washington, to which they had emigrated. His father said, "I've always thought of your grandmother as something of a mystery woman, straight out of central casting." "Oh, Hugh, really?" Patty lightly chided her husband, secretly taking pleasure in his remark. John said, "Dad's right. She is like a mystery woman." "You too," his mother drawled. "Grandmama's coming here next month, by the way." "Cool!" Robbie shouted with his typical exuberance. "Relax, bucko, she's not here yet," said Hugh. When Mrs. McLaurin arrived from Spokane a month later, the detached garage next to the slaughterhouse had, just a few days earlier, somehow caught on fire. Yet this blaze was extinguished before setting fire to the house. 2. Bill Churning, who started out in life as a meat cutter, stood in front of his property with a forensics analyst from the Granite Falls Fire Department. With a scowling face, he gazed at the heap of scorched lumber and ashes which had once been the garage. "What are you going to do about those renters of yours, Bill?" "Well," said Churning, a stout, beefy man who stood just under 6 feet, "if you determine the fire was ignited from an electrical short, there's not much I can do, according to my attorney. But then if you determine the gasoline or meth lab started the whole fucking thing off, those assholes are going to be gone in a heartbeat. You've had some of the worst time with those renters of yours, I've heard," said the fire department specialist. "It's my dumb luck. At least I can be thankful you folks got here in time so that the house itself didn't burn down to the fucking ground." Later that same day at the Douglas Fir Inn's cocktail lounge, Churning sat in his usual seat at the bar as he brooded and mulled over his financial affairs. Out of the blue, he happened to recall the time nearly 4 years ago now, when a guy from that same neighborhood had come to his office one day with a petition signed by nearly everyone within a 3-block radius. Fuck, there'd been over 50 names, closer to 100. The fellow who brought in the petition had been one of those solid secular middle-class types with a desk job. Said his name was Caldwell. Just before the bartender poured his second drink for the evening, he was thinking, well, society is like a multi-dimensional web, and we're all entrapped in it, all of us. No one is excluded. And each of us will die eventually, the ultimate disconnection, the final abbreviation, the adornment of nothing. Everything is fabrication and contrivance, otherwise known as culture. And thus cultural relativism disallows supremacy. As Sylvia prepared to leave on her trip to Granite Falls, she had laid out a number of clothes and a few dresses upon her bed, and gradually, through the evening, while a Scriabin concerto issued forth from the FM CD player in the living room of her condominium, she deliberated over what to take. The following day, she would board the train bound for Seattle. Early that next morning, just prior to first light and the song fest of a few robins which would transpire, Sylvia was awoken by the sound of sirens somewhere a few blocks away. During the pandemic, there had been an endless succession of sirens passing day and night. It had been all so horrible, she thought. Thanks to that criminal maniac of a president we had, an absolute crook and a con artist.